Samuel Grayson was brushing the dust off his finest boots when the war drums began to rumble through Willow Hollow. The sound was faint at first, a low pulse that seemed to rise from the earth itself, but it grew steadily, echoing off the rocky cliffs like a storm that refused to break. He paused, his calloused fingers still clutching the rag, his heart stuttering in his chest. Today was supposed to be the day Margaret arrived from St. Louis. For 3 years, Samuel had carved out a solitary existence on this Colorado ranch, tucked away in the most secluded valley west of the Rockies. The nearest neighbor was a good 15 miles off, and that suited him just fine until this moment. The drums were no idle noise. They belonged to the Tsetsastahees, a Cheyenne war party that had been striking settlements 50 miles south. Word was they were moving north, and now they were here, their rhythm a warning that vibrated through the air. Samuel stepped onto his porch, his hands tightening around the splintered railing. The late afternoon sun stretched long shadows across his land, but something was off. His cattle, usually scattered and grazing, were huddled near the barn, their heads low, their movements jittery. Even his old hound, Rusty, whimpered softly, ears pinned back against his skull. Grabbing his father's battered spyglass from inside the cabin, Samuel climbed onto the roof. What he saw through the lens turned his blood to ice. Dark figures lined the ridge above the valley, at least a dozen at first glance. But as he adjusted the focus, more appeared, and then more still. They weren't scouts or a small band passing through. Hundreds of warriors, perhaps for 100 or more, had positioned themselves at every exit. From Willow Hollow, this wasn't a raid. They had turned his sanctuary into a cage. Samuel's throat went dry as he thought of Margaret. Her stagecoach was due before sunset, rolling down the main trail that now cut through what was unmistakably hostile territory. She had no idea what she was riding into, no clue that the man she'd agreed to marry, a stranger known only through letters, was now the most dangerous person to be near in all of Colorado. He scrambled down from the roof, his mind racing. The smart move was to saddle his horse and slip out through the narrow creek bed to the east, hoping the growing darkness would hide him. But that would mean leaving Margaret to whatever fate awaited her. When her stagecoach entered this valley of death, the drums grew louder, more urgent, no longer just a signal but a conversation, coordinating something imminent. Samuel didn't know that the leader of this war party had been watching him for weeks, waiting for this precise moment. And Margaret's arrival was no accident. Samuel loaded his Winchester with trembling hands, counting his ammunition, 43 rounds against an army. The math was brutal. He'd heard tales of what happened to lone settlers caught by war parties. This Cizzanoni ended well. Margaret's last letter, still tucked in his shirt pocket, weighed on his mind. She'd written of her excitement to meet him, of the pale blue dress she'd bought for their wedding, of a fresh start in a place where her past could stay buried. She trusted him to protect her, to build the life she'd dreamed of. Now, his very existence might get her killed. The drums stopped abruptly. The silence was worse, heavy and unnatural, as if the valley itself held its breath. Even the wind seemed to die. The cattle stood frozen, and Rusty's low whine was the only sound. Then, from the south trail, came the steady clip-clop of a single horse. Samuel's pulse hammered. Through the spyglass, he saw a lone Redera young Cheyenne warrior, hands raised, a white cloth tied to a stick, a flag of truce. The rider moved deliberately, as if wanting to be seen from afar. Samuel's mind churned. In 3 years here, he'd never dealt directly with any tribal war parties. He'd heard they sometimes took prisoners for leverage, but this felt different, personal. The warrior stopped 50 yards from the porch, within rifle range but far enough to signal he wasn't looking for a fight. He was young, maybe 20, with intricate war paint across half his face. His eyes, though, weren't angry, they were calm, almost satisfied, as if everything was unfolding as planned. Samuel Grayson, the warrior called in accented English, "We need to talk." The fact that the stranger knew his name sent a chill through Samuel. He stepped onto the porch, rifle ready but not aimed. "Talk about what?" The warrior's lips twitched, almost a smile. "About the woman you're waiting for. About why we're really here." He paused, letting the words sink in. "About the choice you'll have to make when her stagecoach arrives in 2 hours. But what the warrior said next shattered everything Samuel thought he knew. Your bride isn't coming by accident, Grayson. She's coming because someone told her exactly when and where to find you. Samuel's grip tightened on his rifle. What are you talking about? Margaret and I have been writing for months. She chose to come here. The warrior shook his head. Letters can be written by anyone. The woman you think you know doesn't exist. He reached into a leather pouch and pulled out a folded paper. This is the real Margaret Thompson. She died of fever in St. Louis 3 weeks ago. The blood drained from Samuel's face. The warrior tossed the paper to the ground. Even from a distance, Samuel could see it was a death certificate. The woman he'd planned to marry, whose letters had painted a future together, was buried in a Missouri graveyard. Then who's coming on that stagecoach? His voice was barely a whisper. Someone who needs you to believe she's Margaret Thompson. Someone worth for 100 warriors. The warrior's eyes gleamed with something like pity. Someone you've met before, though you don't remember her. Samuel's mind reeled. Why would anyone orchestrate such a deception? Who could justify surrounding an entire valley with a war party? He racked his brain, searching for any woman from his past with a reason to trick him. You're lying, he said, but his voice wavered. Too many details clicked into place. Margaret's letters had always seemed too perfect, too understanding. She'd never asked about his land, never questioned why he lived so far from civilization. She'd accepted everything without the curiosity a real person might show. The warrior continued. 3 years ago, you were a different man. You lived in a different place. You did things that left scars on people's lives. He gestured to the ridges, where more warriors waited. She hired us to make sure you can't run when she arrives. She wants to face you when she tells you who she really is. Samuel's legs felt weak. Before this valley, before he became a rancher, he'd worn a badge. He'd been Sheriff Samuel Grayson of Blackwater Gulch, a man whose decisions had consequences that haunted others long after he'd fled. He'd thought 3 years of isolation had buried that life, that his penance was complete. The distant sound of wheels broke his thoughts. A stagecoach appeared at the mouth of the canyon, its dust trail rising in the fading light. The woman inside believed she was meeting her future husband, but she was really coming to deliver justice 3 years overdue. The warrior watched Samuel closely, studying every flicker of emotion. You still don't remember, do you? Sheriff Grayson of Blackwater Gulch, the man who put innocent people in the ground because he was too proud to admit he was wrong. The words hit like a fist. Memories flooded back, the raid on the trading post, the family caught in the crossfire, the screams of a young girl as bullets tore through the air. He'd been so certain he was chasing the right men, so convinced he was bringing order to the frontier. But he'd been wrong, catastrophically wrong. The Callahan family, Samuel whispered, the full horror dawning. Margaret Thompson wasn't coming to marry me. She was already dead because of me. The warrior nodded. Her sister, Abigail, survived that day barely. She spent 3 years planning this moment, learning everything about you, tracking you down when you vanished. He pointed to the approaching stagecoach. She wrote those letters. She became Margaret in every way to get close enough to confront you. Samuel's hands shook as he lowered his rifle. Abigail Callahan. He remembered her now, a 12-year-old girl hiding behind a wrecked wagon as her family bled out. He'd been too focused on the outlaws to notice his posse's reckless shooting had hit innocents. By the time he realized his mistake, 3 Callahans were dead, including young Margaret. The stagecoach was close now. Through the spyglass, Samuel saw a woman's silhouette in the window. Abigail Callahan, grown up and coming to settle a debt. What does she want? He asked, though he knew the answer. Justice, the warrior said, his voice cold but not cruel. The kind you never gave her family. She could have had us kill you, it would have been easier. But she wanted you to know why you were dying, to remember their faces when the end came. The stagecoach rolled to a stop in front of the cabin. The driver, oblivious to the warriors watching from the ridges, tipped his hat. Delivery for Mr. Grayson. Got your bride here, safe and sound. But what happened when Abigail Callahan stepped out would prove that some wounds never heal, and some debts demand blood. She was not the Margaret Samuel had imagined. Tall and lean, with dark hair pulled back tightly, Abigail moved with the grace of a predator. Her eyes burned with a cold fire, the kind forged by years of pain. Her simple traveling dress did little to hide the strength in her frame. She looked so much like her father, Thomas Callahan, that Samuel's chest tightened with guilt. Same strong jaw, the same piercing blue eyes, the same unyielding stance. The driver unloaded her trunk, chattering about the fine weather, unaware he'd delivered a woman to her family's killer. Abigail paid him with a smile that never reached her eyes, waiting until the stagecoach vanished before turning to Samuel. Her pleasant mask dissolved, replaced by raw hatred. "Hello, Sheriff Grayson," she said, her voice steady. "Or do you prefer Samuel now? I suppose men like you change names as easily as you change towns." Samuel set his rifle against the porch railing. There was no point pretending. "Abigail, you've grown up. Amazing what surviving a massacre does to a person." She stepped closer, each movement deliberate. "I was 12 when you rode into our trading post, guns blazing, chasing shadows and calling it justice." The warrior, who had called himself Swift Wind, remained mounted, watching with the patience of someone who knew how this would play out. Behind him, more warriors moved into position along the canyon walls, not threatening, just present, ensuring Samuel understood escape was impossible. Abigail stopped 10 feet from the porch. "I spent 3 years tracking you down after you vanished from Blackwater Gulch. 3 years learning to write like a lonely woman desperate for love. 3 years perfecting Margaret's voice so you'd believe every word." "Why?" Samuel asked, though he knew it was futile. "Why not just have them kill me? Why go through all this?" Her laugh was sharp, bitter. "Because a bullet would have been too quick. I wanted you to hope first, to believe you'd found happiness, to think you'd escaped what you did to my family." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I wanted you to feel what we felt when your bullets found us instead of the outlaws you were after." Abigail reached into her bag and pulled out a small wooden box. Samuel recognized it instantly. It had belonged to her father, Thomas, who'd carved it himself to hold his most precious possessions. Seeing it now made Samuel's stomach churn. "Do you remember what you said to me that day?" Abigail asked, her voice trembling with barely controlled rage. "After the shooting stopped, when you realized what your posse had done." Samuel closed his eyes, the memory of physical blow. "I said I was sorry, that it was an accident, that we were chasing dangerous men, and these things happen on the frontier." Abigail finished for him. "That my family was in the wrong place at the wrong time. That I should be grateful you caught the real outlaws before they could hurt anyone else." She opened the box, revealing something glinting inside. Not a weapon, but something worse. "Evidence. Except you never caught the real outlaws, did you, Sheriff? You gave up the chase after what happened to us. The side of the case was too messy, too complicated, too much paperwork." Swift Wind shifted in his saddle, his eyes flicking between them. This wasn't just about revenge, it was something bigger. Abigail pulled a folded document from the box. "I found them, Samuel. The men you were chasing that day. It took me 3 years, but I found them." She unfolded the paper, revealing wanted posters and sworn statements. "They're still alive, still robbing, still killing. Because you were too ashamed to finish what you started." The words hit harder than any bullet. In his guilt over the Callahan deaths, Samuel had abandoned his badge and fled to Willow Hollow. He'd told himself it was penance, that he was too dangerous to wear the badge. But the truth was uglier. Had run from responsibility. "The Donovan gang has killed 16 more people since Blackwater Gulch," Abigail said, her voice growing stronger. 16 people who'd be alive if you'd done your job instead of hiding here, playing rancher. Samuel felt the weight of those deaths, heavier than the badge he'd buried. Bad enough he'd killed innocents through recklessness, but knowing his cowardice had led to more deaths made him feel like he was drowning. Abigail held up another document. "This is a territorial warrant for the Donovan gang, still active, still valid." Her eyes burned with determination. "You're going to help me finish what you started 3 years ago. You're going to help me hunt them down." "And if I refuse?" Samuel asked, though he knew the answer. She gestured to the warriors surrounding the valley. "Then my friends here will make sure you never leave this hollow. But your death won't bring back my family. And it won't stop the Donovan gang from killing more innocents." She stepped closer, her voice fierce. "I want justice, Samuel. Real justice, not just revenge." Abigail pulled a final document from the box, her hands trembling slightly for the first time. The Donovan gang isn't just hitting random travelers anymore. They've gotten organized, smarter. She handed him a telegram, dated 5 days ago. They're planning to hit the children's train next week. Samuel's blood ran cold as he read. Every month, a train carried orphaned children from crowded eastern cities to new families in the West. 45 children, ages 6 to 15, would be on that train, defenseless, hopeful kids. The train stopped in Clearwater to take on water, an isolated station with no law for 50 miles. The gang knows the train carries a strong box with adoption fees, Abigail said. They don't care that children will be caught in the crossfire. Swift Wind nodded. We've been tracking the Donovan gang for weeks. They have 30 men now, well armed and desperate. They've been planning this for months. Samuel felt sick. More innocent children, just like Abigail had been. More families destroyed because he'd failed. Why come to me? You could take this to the territorial marshal, the cavalry Simeon with authority. Abigail's laugh was bitter. I tried. They said the intelligence was unreliable because it came from Cheyenne sources. They won't act on the word of tribal warriors, even when children's lives are at stake. She gestured to Swift Wind. Running Wolf's people have been gathering evidence, trying to stop this massacre. But the authorities won't listen. Running Wolf spoke, his voice heavy with pain. Our children have been taken on trains like this, stolen from their families, sent to boarding schools. We know what it means when children are torn from those who love them. We will not let more die because grown men are too proud to work together. Samuel saw the full scope of Abigail's plan. This wasn't just about her family's deaths. She'd forged an alliance between her quest for justice and the Cheyenne's desire to protect innocent lives. She'd turned his guilt into a weapon to save others. The train reaches Clearwater in 4 days, Abigail said. We can get there in 3 if we push hard. You know the Donovan gang's methods better than anyone. You know how they think, how they operate. She paused, letting the moment settle. You can't bring back my family, Samuel, but you can save those children. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting Willow Hollow in shadow. Samuel looked at his cabin, his cattle, the life he'd built to escape his past. It all felt hollow compared to 45 children who would die if he chose comfort over courage. He walked into his cabin and returned with his old sheriff's badge, hidden for years in a rusted tobacco tin. The metal was cold, heavy with his mistakes and missed chances. I'll help you, he said, pinning the badge to his shirt. Not because I deserve redemption, but because those children deserve to live. Abigail nodded, a flicker of respect in her eyes. This won't make us even, Samuel. Nothing can bring back my family. I know, he replied, but maybe we can stop another family from going through what you did. Running Wolf dismounted and approached. My warriors will ride with us. The Donovan gang has stolen from our people, killed our young men, taken our horses. This debt goes both ways. Within an hour, they were ready. Samuel gathered his weapons, supplies, and his best horse. Abigail changed into riding clothes, her rifle well worn and carefully maintained. The warriors emerged from their positions, a disciplined force united by a shared purpose. As they rode out of Willow Hollow, Samuel realized Abigail's plan had been flawless. She hadn't just wanted to kill him, she had wanted to force him to become the man he should have been 3 years ago. The man who protected the innocent instead of running from failure. The journey to Clearwater was grueling, pushing through rugged terrain and past settlements wary of armed Cheyenne warriors. The alliance was fragilely a disgraced sheriff, a woman driven by justice, and a war party bound by their own losses, but it was powerful. They had skills the Donovan gang wouldn't expect, knowledge they couldn't anticipate, and a motivation deeper than greed. Abigail rode beside Samuel in silence for the first few miles, then spoke softly. My father always said good men weren't the ones who never made mistakes. They were the ones who found the courage to fix them, no matter the cost. Samuel nodded. It was as close to forgiveness as he'd get, and it would have to suffice. The group moved swiftly, avoiding main trails to evade detection. Running Wolf's scouts reported the Donovan gang's movements, confirming they were camped near Clearwater, preparing their ambush. The gang had grown bolder. Their leader, Caleb Donovan, a ruthless tactician who thrived on chaos. On the second night, as they camped in a hidden gulch, Samuel studied the wanted posters Abigail had brought. Caleb Donovan's face stared back, a man he'd once tracked but never caught. Samuel's failure at Blackwater Gulch had let Donovan slip away, and now 45 children were at risk because of it. Running Wolf joined him by the fire. "You carry a heavy burden, Grayson, but guilt alone does no good. It's what you do now that matters." Samuel nodded, the badge on his chest feeling a little less like a curse. "I won't run this time." They reached Clearwater on the third day, just before dawn. The station was a lonely outpost, a single platform beside a water tower, surrounded by open plains. The perfect spot for an ambush. Running Wolf's scouts confirmed the Donovan gang was hidden in a nearby ravine. 30 men armed with rifles and dynamite, ready to hit the train when it stopped. Abigail, Samuel, and Running Wolf devised a plan. The warriors would flank the gang from the west, using the ravine's cover to neutralize their lookouts. Samuel and Abigail would approach from the east, targeting Caleb Donovan directly. The goal was to disrupt the gang before the train arrived, minimizing the risk to the children. As the sun rose, the group moved into position. Samuel's heart pounded, the weight of his past and the lives at stake pressing down. Abigail's eyes were steady, her rifle ready. "This is for my family," she said, "and for those children." Running Wolf's warriors struck first, silent and swift, taking out the gang's sentries before they could raise an alarm. Chaos erupted in the ravine as the gang scrambled to respond. Samuel and Abigail crept closer, spotting Caleb Donovan directing his men from a rocky outcrop. Samuel recognized him instantly, same cold eyes, the same arrogance. "Donovan," he shouted, stepping into view. "This ends today." Donovan laughed, raising his rifle. "Sheriff Grayson, thought you crawled into a hole and died. Come to finish what you botched 3 years ago?" Abigail stepped forward, her voice cutting through the noise. "You killed my family, Donovan, and you're not touching those children." The gang opened fire, but Running Wolf's warriors were relentless, cutting through their ranks with precision. Samuel and Abigail dove for cover, returning fire. Bullets ricocheted off the rocks, the air thick with dust and gunpowder. In the chaos, Samuel saw Donovan slip away, heading for the train tracks. "He's going for the strong box," Samuel shouted. He and Abigail gave chase, dodging gunfire as they ran. The children's train was approaching, its whistle piercing the morning air. Donovan reached the tracks, a satchel of dynamite in hand, ready to derail the train and claim the strong box. Samuel tackled him just as he lit the fuse, the two men crashing to the ground. They grappled, fists in fury, as the train's brakes screeched. Abigail caught up, kicking the dynamite away before it could explode. "This is for Margaret," she said, aiming her rifle at Donovan. But Samuel stopped her. "He needs to face justice, Abigail. The kind we didn't give your family." Donovan sneered, but his men were falling fast, overwhelmed by Running Wolf's warriors. The train came to a stop, the children safe inside, unaware of the battle that had saved them. Running Wolf and his men rounded up the surviving gang members, their victory swift and decisive. Donovan was bound and gagged, his reign of terror ended. As the dust settled, Samuel looked at the train, where children peered out the windows, curious and unharmed. Abigail lowered her rifle, her face a mix of relief and sorrow. "We did it," she said. "For them." Running Wolf approached, his warriors gathering the gang's weapons. "The debt is paid," he said, "for your people and mine." Samuel unpinned his badge and handed it to Abigail. "I don't deserve this, but you do. You brought us together, made this happen." She shook her head. "Keep it. You're not the man you were 3 years ago." They parted ways at Clearwater. Running Wolf and his warriors returned to their lands, their alliance with Abigail a quiet victory against a world that often ignored them. Abigail boarded the train, heading to Denver to deliver the evidence against Donovan to the territorial marshal. Samuel watched her go, knowing their paths might never cross again. Back at Willow Hollow, Samuel returned to his ranch, but it no longer felt like an escape. He'd faced his past, not for forgiveness, but to protect others from his mistakes. The badge stayed in his pocket, a reminder that redemption wasn't a gift, it was earned. For weeks later, Caleb Donovan and his gang faced trial in Denver. The evidence Abigail and Running Wolf had gathered was undeniable, and the territorial authorities, shamed by their earlier inaction, acted swiftly. Donovan was sentenced to hang, and the surviving gang members were imprisoned. The children's train continued its monthly runs, but with armed escorts, a small legacy of the battle at Clearwater. Samuel never heard from Abigail again, but he didn't need to. Her words about good men fixing their mistakes stayed with him, guiding the quiet life he rebuilt. Willow Hollow remained his home, but he was no longer hiding. He was ready to face whatever came next. What do you think, readers? This story dives deep into themes of violence, injustice, and the long road to redemption. Do you believe Samuel earned his second chance? Or should he have faced a harsher punishment for his past? What about Abigail's quest for justice? Was it righteous, or did it risk becoming vengeance? And how do we balance the need for justice with the cycle of violence in our own lives? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I would love to hear your perspective on these tough questions.